thank you for joining us for the next session of the Stagscon Seneschal Meeting Room. We are currently moving into our next class, which is on when the bad things happen. This is working with difficult people, resources and requirements, general information on mediation, demystifying the complaints processes, TRP, and R&D. Please remember these classes are being recorded. Please especially since we might be dealing with difficult topics, keep that in mind, and that these will eventually be published to the kingdom. Thank you. And as an official SCA event, all rules are in effect. Thank you.
Actually, for this discussion, I think we're going to probably try to keep the initial part of the discussion perhaps to some administration type stuff with difficult places and difficult people. I think it may be better so we can have some more candid discussion towards the end of the meeting to end recording. Right now, we'll start with introductions. Again, my name is Sir Christine. I am the current Kingdom Seneschal. Following me will be Mistress Aldith. Mistress Aldith, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Mistress Aldith of Baldwin, or Deb Emmons.
We've got a guest speaker or a guest joining us today. Master Balthazar, would you like to introduce yourself real quick and state what you have or why you're interested in this topic?
Sure. So, hi, my name is Balthazar. I was for a while Deputy Kingdom Seneschal for special projects. Most of those special projects ended up being investigations, trying to help out the Seneschal's office. And doing that, some of that, instead of investigations, really morphed into mediations. And I've been involved even beyond the time I was there with some mediations and things. So I'm here to listen and to chime in where I can, although I don't know that I consider myself any sort of expert. Excuse me, expert. My voice is still trashed from yesterday, sorry. But yeah, so that's why I'm here. So thanks for having me.
And it's always good to have you on. Thank you. All right. So this discussion was titled Working with Difficult People. We've got several examples. We've also have on this panel a number of experienced seneschals and inexperienced folks. Initially, I thought that maybe we should discuss options, mediation. We really, in the Seneschalette, we don't have a lot of options when people decide to be really obstinate. We can either try mediation or we're going to have to sanction. Mediation is really the best route to go in these cases. And it takes a lot of social skills, a lot of emotional energy, and a lot of self-control to try to keep things on going well. So what kind of questions do we have about this, or where do you folks want to start as a jump off point for this discussion?
Well, can I start off with a thing?
Sure.
Over the years, many different things have happened, and some of them are a little more heinous than others. I use that particular word, but I think maybe we can start with the fact that as Seneschals, we're the buck stops here for our local events. And so if something is happening at a local event, either if we're not at it for some reason, somebody's going to have to call us and tell us about it or see. And I have it's a little frustrating for me to have to keep looking at it, but in the modern world, we have that if you see something, say something. And you pretty much see that everywhere. And it applies to everything, whether or not it was something horrible like an assault, or whether somebody stole something, or whether you think a little person as being abused by their parents, all kinds of silliness in there. But the society doesn't see it in that way. Pretty much, if someone it has an issue, it has to be what we would now call the victim who has to kind of file the report. If it's not something that you had to call the local authorities on, or if something happened at your event where somebody stole something, there was an assault, there was something else, you have to call the local authorities and make that report first. And I don't know how many of us who have been on this one have been in that category. We only had one that I'm aware of in Winkeep, and it wasn't so much of a physical assault, but it was an issue where at an event there was an illegal substance, and people who were on site were teachers, and they are by law have to report that. And so we got that all reported and done. Everything was handled what I would call below the radar, but things were done in there. But that is something that I guess isn't as in your face as having a dry site and having someone have alcohol. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think the first thing when we begin this kind of a discussion is to remember and remind folks that mundane law comes first. If an unsafe situation arises, we need to call the mundane authority. I think folks are getting more and more used to that, but I know in the past we've had some problems with that. So first we need to try to maintain a safe environment, and we need to follow mundane law. Most of your egregious acts, like Mr. Stahl is talking about, follow mundane law and are almost an easier thing to deal with for the Seneschal in some ways because it's a little clearer. When we get into some of the less clear issues, and I was kind of hoping to have a discussion in that respect, because it seems like we spend a lot more time dealing with that. Things like rumor, slander, he said, she said. For instance, one of the examples given to us by our social media folks was that, and this is paraphrased from a previous issue, and pardon my inappropriate language, but that was part of what was quoted. What the fuck is this rainbow shit? This libtard BS isn't period. No one was gay before the 70s. So we have issues like that, and we have people like that we will probably have to deal with. And so anymore, these kind of issues, like the one the social media folks just sent us, are seen more seriously and taken more seriously in the SCA. That might warrant an investigation and potentially sanctions. So that's that kind of that's a jumping point perhaps for this discussion. Does anybody have any ideas as to how they would want to deal with such a situation if somebody was?
Is this on an SCA page or on their personal page?
Well, and that's the first thing to ask, but let's say this is on a SCA page.
I would say that we needed to have a chat with, at some point on that. I mean, I know the society also does monitor personal accounts for doing things, especially when it references anything to do with the SCA or a group or something like that. But if that was on an SCA page, I would be suggesting that person be moderated until we could have a chat with them about that kind of stuff. And if they persist, then they're off.
And not to pick on anybody, but Master Balthazar, would you have anything to say about such a situation?
I mean, I always want to operate from the position of we don't want to toss people we don't have to toss. And so, um, so, but there's also, we have responsibilities not just to the people who are allegedly misbehaving, but all the people who are impacted by them, right? And so that's the kind of thing that obviously, you get removed right away. And and I mean, you can put them on moderation right away, but I think you have to have that conversation right away of like, look, this is your one chance to to not just be tossed because, we're not, these are our rules. And if you can't comply with those rules, then that's fine. You can't comply with those rules, um, but that's a choice, and if you're not going to comply with those rules, then you're not going to be here to comply with those rules. And so something like that, I think it's very quickly, very much an ultimatum, frankly, on something that egregious, right? It's not
Right.
usually sometimes it's a little more subtle than that, and then you have to just kind of play that by ear, I think, on what you think you need to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Balthazar. Yeah, in my opinion, this is actually kind of a somewhat cut and dry situation. We have somebody that is not following what we feel are our goal, our values, right? They are really calling people out. We don't want to get necessarily just say, "Hey, you're done." But in this case, I don't think this warrants mediation because we don't have any latitude. We don't need this kind of behavior. I think this person should be given an opportunity to change their behavior. But like Master Balthasar just said, you know, one strike, maybe at most two, and you're looking at sanctions. Bringeleye.
To continue this process, when somebody does get sanctioned and they happen to show up at an event after they have been sanctioned, for the group, what would be the process of not allowing them back in?
That's a great question. Thank you. So, if somebody shows up that has been sanctioned, you ask them to leave. If they're on a social media account or online, they should not be allowed to post. They should be banned from posting to your websites. If they refuse to leave, at that point, you may have to call the mundane authorities. Hopefully, when you ask them to leave, they will do so. Aldith.
And I think at that point, we need to define what kind of sanction was done. If we're just saying that's inappropriate to be putting on media for people to be doing, don't do that again, and then they do that again, it takes to the point of, well, we remove them from that social media thing. And if they continually are doing that, then we need to advance it to a higher level of that. But if somebody who is on one of our lists that we have, like a TRP, R&D, not necessarily just under investigation, because sometimes they're under investigation without being TRP. They're just, they're fact finding. But if somebody like that shows up, they cannot enter. They can't pay for their stuff. They can't do. They just have to leave, and it becomes trespassing if they won't leave.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Aldith, and to clarify all this statement as well. So, what happens when people behave very badly? We initiate an investigation. Master Balthazar has been the Kingdom's investigations deputy, so he's done this work and it's very much appreciated. And it's some of the harder part of the SCA. Once the investigator writes up their findings, they report it to the Seneschal. The Seneschal will read their findings and discuss with the Crown and society to determine what is the appropriate action. Sometimes an investigation does not warrant any action, and then it's all done. Like Mr. Salters was talking about, those folks aren't on that list you get monthly. That is TRP. Once they get, and we should probably define TRP, but temporary removal from play is what that is. So that's a temporary timeline where they're not allowed to participate in the SCA. And at that point, they are asked to not come. The other thing we might happen if it's particularly severe is what we've been calling an R&D, or revocation and denial of membership. So we take somebody's membership and they're never allowed to come back to the SCA. So those are the different forms of sanctions that we have. Do we have any questions about that and that process? Yes, Aldith.
It's not a question, but just to say, when they are the focus of an investigation and they are given a thing for TRP, they are sent a registered letter that informs them of what the action is. It's not like somebody made a complaint against someone and there's some sort of super secret something else going on in the background. The individual or individuals, or however that happens, are all sent they have to sign for it. A letter that says this is what it is and this is why it is and this is how long it is in some cases. So the fact that they would get that information and then show up at an event is kind of fuel for the fire. But we don't get a copy of the letter or anything else that is sent out to the individuals that is happening. But then again, not all investigations involve a TRP. They're just going to do fact finding. So it's important to look at the list for those people who've been R&D'd in TRP. And if you're having an event in your group, take a look and see who pre-regs. There's nothing, you as the Seneschal, you don't have to put that list at gate or anything like that. But you look at that list and have an idea. And if you can diffuse the situation before they show up at gate, that's great. You may have forgotten, but you're not allowed to come to an SCA event yet. And we wouldn't want to embarrass you further or whatever else, how lovely you'd like to do that.
And honestly, I cannot recall in any of my time as Seneschal, local or Kingdom, anybody who was sanctioned coming to an event. So there's the good news. I think maybe once it happened. And that not in my experience. I just heard of it happening once. Batu, you have your hand up?
One, I do also believe that certain sanctions must be announced in court, but I also want to ask, what is the best way to deal with somebody asking about a active or a suggested investigation? I know in government sometimes it's hey, no comment, and that's the only thing that you should say is no comment because it's ongoing. But to deal with potential SCA rumor mill of, oh, I hear so and so's under investigation or things like that, what's the best tips and tricks for dealing with people that are trying to nose into an investigation versus somebody that might be trying to add content to an investigation?
Well, and really that needs to be kind of a no comment. We try to keep any investigations internal within the Seneschalette. We have trusted folks like Master Balthazar who are investigations deputies. And like we went over in the last meeting, we have a warranting system. Those folks have got to be warranted. And as a warranted officer of the SCA, that information of that investigation is to remain private. Until there are findings, it's between that person and the SCA.
And
Unfortunately,
I'd also say if they want to press you for it, because look, you're the Seneschal, you need to do things. You can smile and say, if you have questions about it, why don't you get a hold of the Society Seneschal? Because corporate is the people who are in charge of any investigation SCA wide. And that way, it's not really passing the buck quite so much. But when they're going to go to the corporate level, they're just going to say Nunya. And whether that at corporate level then has our things where we have to say Nunya, they don't have another avenue to pursue to do rumors and all that other stuff.
Does that answer your question, Batu?
Yes, I was just trying to tee up a topic for one of those things on how best to respond to that. The other thing that might be a bit tricky here is after an investigation is done and things have been resolved, what happens if, are there any good ways for dealing with someone who won't let it go? Whether they're the ones that
Yeah.
are accusing or the ones that were accused and trying to go, because that can be another messy situation in the SCA because you have the rumor mill
It
both
can.
on getting
And
it going and afterwards.
it can. And in those cases, it really depends on the severity of what's going on. If people are just throwing rumors all over the place, we recently had a situation like that. And what we generally do is we have mediation and we have a talk between that person, the seneschal, and perhaps, like, if that person's a non-peer, a trusted peer or a friend, somebody who can help them get past this. And we have the seneschal as part of that mediation. Or sometimes we'll have a mediator, but at this point in the kingdom, I don't believe we have any official warranted mediators. So it's going to be a seneschal that sits down and talks to them to tell them, look, you're spreading rumors, and we cannot have you doing this. If you continue to do so, these are the actions we will have to take. And depending on the severity, it can lead to another investigation and potential sanctions. But we try mediation first. We try talking with them, both parties, if it's both parties, and say, hey, you guys have to stop talking about this, especially at events or, within the context of the SCA.
Is it a reality that, let's say that, because we all know that eventually some of these crazinesses start spreading around, and somebody has a rumor that they did X or they looked at X and did something, and then they have an investigation, and then everyone is cleared. In other words, after they have the investigation, everything, it was either found that something did not happen or there was bad information or something else. And then all of a sudden at an event, maybe someone was TRP, but they're back now and everything is fine. How do we navigate that one when somebody comes up to us and says, I thought X was involved in Y? Well, they did an investigation at corporate,
Right. And that's what we do. We say, hey, look, we've had this investigated. We've had no findings of wrongdoing on their part. But really, that's all you can really say. And hopefully they'll all quit. That'll end it. But that can be difficult. But if you let them continue to ramp up, and I have seen this happen where, somebody decides that somebody else is guilty of something and they really start spreading those rumors, you need to pull them in as soon as you can for mediation, and talk to them about that and say, look, this is a serious thing. Because most folks in your group are not going to pay attention to that stuff. But once those rumors really get flying and people really start talking about it, they might start paying attention. And then that's what kind of spoils the funner parts of the game, shall we say, for your average Skadian. Ringalai.
One thing I thought about on the same topic is if rumors are being spread, but they're not in sanctioned SCA time or during things, on certain members, like let's say a Shire gets together and just has lunch after a meeting or something. Big meeting. What would be done and should be done in that situation?
And that's where it gets difficult, right? It really depends on what's being said. A lot of the time, if it's not at an SCA event, it's not my circus, not my monkeys. But if it's SCA adjacent or it starts impacting events, then you have to do something about that. So it's very situation dependent. But here's the thing. There are some good people to talk to about that, who have had experience with that. Master Balthazar is one of them. Mr. Saldith is. I've had to deal with that. So we have people who can support you. And honestly, with any questions like that, I wouldn't wait to report it in the OSP. Write your Kingdom Seneschal and say, hey, I have this situation. Does this count as something I need to do something about, or should I just let it go? And, we'll set up a meeting with you. We'll talk to you, and we'll try to find the best way through.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of the issues that was in the prior investigation in the other kingdom for doing it was something that did not happen on an SCA event or an SCA thing. It happened on the person's personal page, and then it was documented that the things that were talked about actually happened, is a good way to put it, and that person is no longer invited to at a thing. And the topic of conversation is absolutely an SCA thing, and this happened, and at an SCA thing or something else is there, then yeah, we need to know about it. If they're talking about something that happened outside of an SCA event and you're not at an SCA event when it's doing it, you yourself have to decide in the modern world if it's if you see something, say something, even if you didn't see it, but if you hear it and you think it might be something that could be actionable, you've got to make a kind of a judgment call there. And there's nothing wrong with getting a hold of any of us up here to ask the question.
Caroline.
So kind of as the newbie, where is or what is like the official like code of conduct or line, like what is versus isn't allowed? Like, is there an official document that can be referenced?
Yes, there is actually an official code of conduct on the society webpage. And I don't know if I can try to look it up while I'm talking, because I can't do two things at once. I'm not that person. But I can try to send that to you if you want to see it.
If it's under the document library, I should be able to find it. I just wasn't sure if it existed. So
yes, we have an official code of conduct, and it's definitely worth a read.
And on the code of conduct, and it also has a, we saw a little bit earlier with Aishi, was it has this thing on sanctions and talks about what can happen and how that happens. So if it's something that you want to familiarize yourself with, by all means, it's a long read, for doing things. And then again, if you see something in there you have a question on, again, get with us. And if we can't get the answer right away because we know, we'll get the answer from somebody else who knows and get it to you. But yeah, we have a code of conduct.
And it does look like we have a link shared in the chat to that code of conduct.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Much appreciated, folks.
Yes, I'm on my cell phone and trying to figure out how to get into the chat on mobile.
All right. Well, are there any other questions down this vein, or should we look at the interesting Kerguelen
Here
incident?
would
And if that's the case,
be a question. When would you, since you do have newbies and others and potentially new peers or new people that are now in positions of seneschal or deputy, when do you decide to stop trying to mediate yourself? When do you try and elevate it? When do you or how do you recommend it to go to a full investigation? If somebody has walked up to you with a problem, what is the best way in an attempt to go about that? And please let me know before we move on to the individual topics when we need to stop recording, since that can get into stuff. So just keep that in mind.
yeah,
Thank you.
I'll field this and then we'll probably quit. But early and often, please contact your Kingdom Seneschal early and often. The less experience you have, the sooner. I mean, even if it's just something really, really simple, or you think might be simple, and you have the littlest question about. Again, I think I'm really glad you asked about that code of contact. Look at the code of conduct. If it doesn't meet the code of conduct, or it's just a little weird, or you think it might have the potential to cause strife in your group, please contact the Kingdom Seneschal. We have tools like mediation, or even just a little discussion with folks that can really cut things off before they get big. So whenever, I mean, it can be as simple as, oh, so and so fighter A called fighter B, or fighter A said to fighter B, hey bro, I'll fight you on that. If you have concerns about that, let us know. I mean, depending on who fighter A and fighter B is, they're just joking, but it's always good to ask. And if you feel comfortable asking them, that's another thing that you can do.
You have a hand up, or if
Yep.
not, multiple.
Asta, and then Aldith.
I was taught early, if I don't like surprises, my boss doesn't like surprises, just keep them in the loop. It doesn't have to be asking advice or anything, just keeping them in the loop so that way there's no surprises.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Aldith.
The only thing I kind of wanted to mention a little bit is sometimes we need to be reminded on the bullying policy, which is kind of one of the first things that we might get when people are complaining about someone else's conduct, on what bullying really is in the modern world and what we may consider it, for being here. I mean, early on, when I was asked, I said I would consider bullying when I was growing up the fact that I might get pushed down the stairs and my lunch money taken, kind of a bullying. So it's a little more physical, rather than someone coming up to you and say, I don't like the color of your glasses, or you're ugly, or those kind of things. And how many times that has to happen before it can be considered a bullying complaint where we would have to do things and actionable. You're going to get people all the time who pee in each other's Wheaties. Go get some Cheerios. I mean, change the cereal. But it just because people like to shake the trees rather than water them. And so sometimes if you just ignore those first couple of pretty feeble attempts to rock your world, then they're going to go find somebody else to mess with, just like if you're having this stuff for little kids. So being able to recognize the fact that somebody was just there, and wanting to gauge your reaction versus being really there on it.
Yeah, and on the other hand, the SCA is a different world. I remember very early in my SCA career, somebody actually meant it when they said, I am going to break your neck. I'm going to rip you limb from limb. And because we were playing this odd game and I was fighting, I kind of wasn't sure whether to take that seriously or not. And they continued to say that. And they actually kind of meant it. So we do have to take threats like that seriously, even though it seems, it can kind of seem kind of weird. That's something it took me years to grapple with and figure out, but I think so. There are no cut and dry answers. Batu, and then I think we'll probably hit the Kerguelen issue.
So, dealing with transparency in its own way, and earlier you talked about having warranted people that are doing the investigations, but you also mentioned talking to trusted peers or people to approach them. What hazards can there be with reaching out to different and the thought that the SCA handles things internally where it's, oh, the Knights will handle that, oh, the Pelicans will handle that, and dealing with some of those where it's like when the peers try and step in versus assuring that we are following the process that needs to happen that our organization has outlined for a proper investigation.
That is a super great question, Batu. Um, my rule of thumb with that is you want to keep the seneschalette or investigations deputy or somebody warranted in the loop at all times. I think where the peers can help is when you've got two parties that are upset and say they have friends that are peers. Those peers can help talk them through some of the feelings and some of the processes and maybe make them feel a little bit more secure so that they can work to an equitable or a better feeling or a solution. But you need to keep somebody warranted involved. Aldith, did you have anything to add to that?
No, not particularly, although I had a situation a little bit like that when I was Kingdom Exchequer, in that the local officer was not reporting. And trying to get that local officer to report and doing other things. And of course, it keeps you from that point as a Kingdom officer from completing your report, and you're going to get a little hate mail from corporate. And so I inquired whether or not that person had a peer, where they actually commit, with someone, whether they were an apprentice or a squire or however that was, and finding out that indeed they did, I contacted their peer just to say, I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you guys have your little ceremonies, sometimes you say, if they're doing good, tell them. If they're doing bad, tell me. In those kind of things. Well, I need some help trying to figure out how we can best make this person realize what the situation is. And 2 days later, everything was fine. But so they listened to their peer. But I think it's a little different when they're not physically connected to a peer, when they just have peers as friends. You have to be careful about who you might want to let in on that, even with somebody else who is who's there for mediating or the seneschal thing, because the information doesn't need to go very far. As far as it needs to go to get it resolved, but it doesn't need to go any further.
Thank you very much. On that, let me do my little closeout here. Thank you very much for attending this session of this class. We're going to do a breakout with some more focused studies and examples from years past. We will not be recording those since they are still some things that people might have opinion or might want to keep close to the chest. So thank you very much for attending. We will resume at our next class. Thank you.